Hi there, today I would like to present to you the reinvention of the wheel and how to use it. Klangmacht by Ugritone, produced by me. This will actually become a whole series of drum sample libraries. Over the last 35 years I sampled almost every drum kit of every production I ever was involved in. On top of that, for the last 2.5 years we sampled tons of production-proof drum kits to become part of the Klangmacht family. So let's turn the wheel. Here we go. Actually, every Klangmacht plugin has its own built-in MIDI player file, so you can start right away checking it out. Now that we know what turning the big wheel sounds like, let me give you a short overview of the GUI interface. Besides what we call the big wheel, you have a top view representation of all the elements of the drum kit that was sampled. So by clicking on each of the elements you hear the sampled sound as you would sit behind the drum kit like the real drummer. If you later on wish to put the whole kit into what I call the audience perspective, you can do that very easily by just hitting the button. Also, you can switch the whole set from digital to analog, as all samples were recorded parallel to 24-track analog 2-inch tape or directly to digital pristine high-end AD converters. Now let's explore what actually is under the hood. Let's switch from easy mode to mixer mode. There you have the basic controls of the instruments. Now it becomes clear what the big wheel is actually doing. If you turn it, you can actually see how some of the level controls of the instruments change their position. Now you also can change the separate instruments level to your liking, so you get a different balance. All the separate instruments can also be soloed and muted, of course. The two orange buttons lets you take them out of the near and far rooms. Let's take out all the instruments of the rooms for now and just play the snare. Routed into the near room, more precisely you're actually switching on the near room samples of the snare. If you turn up the level now of the near room, you can actually hear the effect pretty precise. Now let's do the same with the far rooms. Switch it on and listen to what the far room is actually doing. If you combine the near and the far room, you have a great depth to your instruments. You can determine for every instrument if the near room samples or the far room samples are switched on or off. So that gives you an incredible flexibility. Listen to the incredible dimension you're adding and gaining also with the cymbals when they are switched into the rooms. But that's not all. There's an even more elaborate layer of possibilities to be explored. Stay tuned for what we call the full level. So finally, full level control. We arrive at the full level control mode. On this, you have, in addition to all the controls of the mixer mode, some very unique controls to shape your drum sound even further. Let's first take a look at the kick control settings. Here you can add now an impact kick shot sample. Just a one-shot sample. Sometimes it's better to add a more tight and impact sample than turning the kicks up, This is a sample that over the years I added quite often to my recordings, so I thought I'd give it to you as well. Let's hear what it does. So to add a little bit more impact to your kick, that's the way to go. Basically, the same idea is behind the impact snare shot. This is also a one-shot sample and one of my favorite samples out of my arsenal to add to my recordings. Right below here is the control of the snare reverb. I always layer different reverbs on top of each other to create my own personal snare reverb. I almost never just use one reverb for any effect. Over the years, this became my most used combination. Now it's yours to add even more depth and dimension to the snare. A little bit further down are the character controls. Air is actually the overhead signal of the full set without the cymbals. So there you can add a more natural, airy dimension to your kit. Right below is a density control, which adds a very natural and discrete limiter effect to the snare to create a less natural but more like machine gun kind of precise dynamic for the snare. Sometimes in the metal genre that's more desired than a dynamically full natural sound. To get even more into the machine-like feeling, we added the steady button, which actually reduces the round robin of the snare samples from its full 12 samples down to approximately 3 to 4. Bleed. The last section to take a look at is the bleed section. The cymbal bleed is actually the bleed of all the cymbals etc. into the shell microphones. Mostly of course into the tom microphones. If you solo the hi-hat right and crashes and solo the cymbal bleed as well and just bring it in, you can hear that effect. It compacts the cymbals into your drum kit. Adding the rooms to that and you have all the dimensions you can wish for of a great sounding drum kit right there. Shell bleeding is even more impressive. This is the bleeding from every single shell microphone into all the other shell microphones. Solo the bass drum and the snare and the shell bleed. How much dimension you gain just by adding the bleed. This is actually what most people kill when they start gating their drums. Klangmacht lets you embrace all the dimensions and depth of your drum elements. Drums get all the power and massiveness from the acoustic space they are recorded in. Klangmacht puts that power directly under your fingertips.